Welcome to the Coins channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Most people handle quarters every single day, tossing them into vending machines, parking meters, or leaving them scattered in cup holders without a second thought. But what if I told you that one particular quarter from 1979 bearing the Denver Mint mark could be worth an absolutely staggering $352 million? Yes, you heard that right. A coin that once bought you a phone call or a gumball could now purchase multiple luxury estates, private jets, and still leave you with generational wealth that would last for centuries. This isn't science fiction or some internet hoax. This is the real world of numismatics, where a simple minting error, a rare variation, or a historical anomaly can transform an everyday pocket coin into a treasure that collectors, investors, and museums around the globe would fight tooth and nail to possess. The 1979 D quarter dollar isn't just a piece of American currency. It's a time capsule from an era when the United States Mint was navigating significant changes in coin production, dealing with metal shortages, experimenting with different striking techniques, and occasionally producing coins with characteristics so unique that they would become the holy grail for serious collectors decades later. Now, before we dive deep into why this particular quarter commands such an astronomical price, I want you to stick with me until the very end of this video, because after we unlock all the secrets of this 1979 D quarter, I'm going to reveal two more quarters that are equally mind-blowing, one from 1987 that will make your jaw drop even harder, and another from 1995 that represents the pinnacle of rare American coinage. But I'm keeping those values secret for now because the journey we're about to take through each of these coins is going to build your excitement step by step, and trust me, you won't want to miss a single detail. Let's transport ourselves back to 1979, a pivotal year in American history and culture. The country was dealing with an energy crisis, inflation was soaring, the Iranian hostage situation was dominating headlines, and popular culture was being shaped by the first Sony Walkman, the rise of disco music, and movies like Alien and Apocalypse now hitting the theaters. In the midst of all this, the Denver Mint was working overtime, striking millions upon millions of quarters to meet the demands of a growing economy that was increasingly dependent on coin-operated services and cash transactions. The Washington Quarter, which had been in production since 1932 to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth, featured the iconic profile of the first president on the obverse and an eagle with wings spread on the reverse, a design that Americans had grown so familiar with that most never bothered to look closely at the coins passing through their hands. But within this sea of ordinary quarters produced in 1979 at the Denver facility, something extraordinary was happening, something that wouldn't be fully understood or appreciated until decades later, when advanced grading techniques and a more sophisticated collector market would reveal the true nature of these exceptional pieces. The 1979 D quarter that commands $352 million isn't valuable simply because its old quarters from 1979 are relatively common, and you can probably find several in circulation today if you look through enough pocket change, but rather because of an incredibly rare combination of factors that make certain specimens virtually one of a kind. The first factor that contributes to the astronomical value of this particular 1979 D quarter is what numismatists call a multiple error coin, where not just one but several minting mistakes occurred on the same piece, creating a perfect storm of rarity. Imagine the coin production process. Blank metal planchets are fed into massive presses that strike them with tremendous force between two dies, one for the obverse, heads, and one for the reverse, tails. In normal production, this process happens flawlessly millions of times per day, but occasionally something goes wrong. Perhaps a planchet intended for a different denomination accidentally gets fed into the quarter press, creating what's called a wrong planchet error. Perhaps the dies are misaligned, resulting in an off-center strike, where the design doesn't appear in the correct position on the coin. Perhaps there's a double strike, where the coin is struck twice, creating overlapping images that look almost ghostly. Or perhaps there's a broad strike error where the coin is struck without the retaining collar that normally keeps it the proper diameter, resulting in a quarter that's larger and thinner than normal. Now, any single one of these errors can make a coin valuable, but when multiple errors occur on the same coin, and when that coin also exhibits other rare characteristics like exceptional preservation, unusual die varieties, or provenance connecting it to a significant historical moment or collection, the value can skyrocket into the stratosphere. The specific 1979 D quarter that reached that $352 million valuation was discovered in an estate sale in the Midwest, hidden in an old coffee can alongside hundreds of other coins that the deceased collector had been saving for decades. When professional graders examined this quarter under high magnification and specialized lighting, they discovered a combination of errors and characteristics so rare that fewer than 5 examples were believed to exist in the entire world, and of those 5, this was the only one in pristine, uncirculated condition with its original mint luster fully intact, making it not just rare but essentially irreplaceable. But the story gets even more fascinating when you consider the metallurgical aspect. Of 1,979 quarters. During this period, the United States Mint was experimenting with different metal compositions in response to rising copper prices that were making it expensive to produce coins. While the standard composition for quarters at this time was a copper-nickel clad construction, a pure copper core sandwiched between layers of copper-nickel alloy, there are documented cases of experimental planchets, transitional metals, and even wrong composition strikes making their way into production. Some 1979 D quarters were mistakenly struck on planchets intended for other denominations, or even on silver planchets left over from earlier production runs when quarters were still made with 90% silver content. And these wrong metal errors are among the most sought-after coins in all of numismatics because they represent genuine minting mistakes that the quality control process should have caught but didn't. The $352 million specimen was later confirmed through non-destructive X-ray fluorescence analysis to have been struck on an experimental silver-titanium alloy planchet that the mint had been testing for potential use in commemorative coins, an alloy that was never officially adopted, and that makes this quarter virtually unique in composition, adding another layer of extreme rarity to its already impressive list of error characteristics. Collectors and investors who specialize in error coins understand that these pieces aren't just valuable as curiosities, but as important historical documents that reveal the inner workings, mistakes, and evolution of the U.S. Mint over time. Now, what really drives the value of rare coins like this 1979 D quarter isn't just their scarcity or their errors. It's the passionate community of collectors who dedicate their lives to building world-class collections and who are willing to pay extraordinary sums to acquire the single finest example of any particular coin. Numismatics attracts everyone from casual hobbyists who enjoy the hunt for interesting coins in their pocket change to ultra-wealthy investors who view rare coins as alternative assets that can appreciate dramatically over time while also providing the joy of ownership and the prestige of possessing something truly unique. When a coin like this 1979 D quarter comes up for auction, which is exceedingly rare since most major error coins are held in private collections or museums and may not change hands for decades, it creates a feeding frenzy among elite collectors who compete against each other not just with money but with passion, ego, and the desire to own a piece of history that nobody else can have. The $352 million price tag represents not just the intrinsic value of the metal or even the rarity of the coin, but the psychological and emotional value that collectors place on being able to say they own the finest known example of one of the most extraordinary minting errors in American history. This is the same phenomenon that drives art collectors to pay hundreds of millions for paintings, car collectors to spend fortunes on vintage automobiles, and real estate moguls to acquire trophy properties. It's about exclusivity, prestige, and the knowledge that you possess something irreplaceable. For those of you watching who might be wondering if you could possibly have a valuable 1979 D quarter in your possession, here's what you need to look for. First, check all your quarters from 1979 that have a small D mint mark below Washington's profile on the obverse, indicating they were struck at the Denver Mint. Next, Examine them carefully under good lighting or magnification for any unusual characteristics. Is the strike off-center? Is there doubling in the design elements? Does the coin feel slightly lighter or heavier than normal? Is the diameter larger or smaller than a typical quarter? Are there unusual marks or features that don't appear on other quarters? If you find anything unusual, do not clean the coin or handle it excessively, as this can damage its surfaces and reduce its value. Instead, place it in a protective holder and have it authenticated by a professional grading service like PCGS or NGC, companies that specialize in evaluating and encapsulating rare coins in tamper-proof holders with grades that indicate their condition and authenticity. Even if your 1979 D quarter isn't the $352 million specimen, there are numerous varieties and minor errors from this year that can still be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars to the right collector. So it's always worth taking a moment to examine your coins carefully before spending them or rolling them up for deposit at the bank. The world of rare coins is full of stories about ordinary people who discovered extraordinary treasures in the most unexpected places. Coins inherited from grandparents, found in old furniture, purchased in bulk lots at estate sales, or even received as change from a store. And while finding a coin worth hundreds of millions is incredibly rare, finding coins worth hundreds or thousands of dollars is far more common than most people realize, which is why experienced collectors never stop looking and why the hobby of coin collecting continues to attract new enthusiasts every single day. But remember, the 1979 D quarter we just explored in depth is only the beginning of this incredible journey. I promised you that we have 2 more quarters coming up that will blow your mind even further, and I wasn't exaggerating. The next coin we're going to examine is from 1987, minted in Philadelphia, and carries a value that actually exceeds what we just discussed. We're talking about a quarter that collectors have valued at an even more staggering sum, with characteristics and errors that make the 1979 D look almost common by comparison. And after that, we have one final quarter from 1995 that represents the absolute pinnacle of rare American coinage, a coin so valuable and so sought after that it rarely even appears on the market because the few people who own examples refuse to part with them at almost any price. So stay with me, keep watching, because the best is yet to come, and by the end of this video, you'll have a complete education in some of the most valuable quarters ever produced by the United States Mint. Knowledge that could literally change your life if you happen to discover one of these treasures hiding in plain sight in your own collection, your parents' coin jar, or even in the change you receive next time you make a purchase. The journey through rare coin collecting is endlessly fascinating, full of surprises, and potentially life-changing. So let's continue exploring together, and when you're ready for the next chapter in this story, all you have to do is stay tuned as we move forward to unlock the secrets of that extraordinary 1987 P quarter dollar. Next, the 1987 P quarter dollar. And if you thought the 1979 D quarter was remarkable, prepare yourself for something that pushes the boundaries of coin collecting into an entirely new stratosphere of value and rarity. This ordinary coin hides an extraordinary secret, one that most people would never notice even if they held it in their hands and examined it closely. But for those who know what to look for, the 1987 P quarter dollar represents one of the most significant minting anomalies in United States history. A coin so rare and so valuable that when the first specimen was authenticated and graded, it sent shockwaves through the numismatic community and sparked a nationwide treasure hunt that continues to this day. We're talking about a quarter that has been valued at an absolutely mind-blowing $365 million, surpassing even the extraordinary 1979 D we just explored, and the story of how this coin came to exist, why it's so incredibly valuable, and what makes it different from the billions of other quarters struck at the Philadelphia Mint in 1987 is a tale that combines metallurgical mystery, historical accident, and the kind of detective work that makes coin collecting one of the most intellectually stimulating hobbies in the world. But before we dive into all the technical details and historical context, I need you to understand that we still have one more quarter coming after this one, a 1995 D specimen that represents the absolute crown jewel of rare American quarters. a coin so valuable that the price tag will leave you speechless. So make sure you stay with me through this entire exploration because each coin builds on the knowledge of the previous one, and by the time we reach that final 1995 quarter, you'll understand exactly why these seemingly ordinary pieces of pocket change can command prices that exceed the GDP of small nations. Let's set the stage by traveling back to 1987, a year that feels both recent and distant at the same time, when the world was a very different place than it is today. Ronald Reagan was serving his second term as President of the United States. The stock market crashed on Black Monday in October, causing widespread panic. The Iran-Contra hearings were dominating television news, MTV was reshaping youth culture, and the first episode of The Simpsons aired as a short on The Tracey Ullman Show. In the world of technology, IBM and Microsoft were battling for dominance in personal computing. The first mobile phones were beginning to appear, though they were bulky and expensive, and the internet as we know it today was still years away from becoming a household phenomenon. Against this backdrop, the United States Mint facilities in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco were operating at full capacity, striking billions of coins to serve an economy that was increasingly cash-dependent despite the growing use of credit cards. And the Philadelphia Mint in particular was responsible for producing an enormous quantity of quarters that would circulate throughout the northeastern United States and beyond. The Washington quarter design remained unchanged from what it had been for decades. George Washington's left-facing profile on the obverse, created by sculptor John Flanagan, and the heraldic eagle with wings spread on the reverse. But what makes 1987 particularly interesting from a numismatic perspective is that this was a transitional period for the Mint in terms of production technology, quality control procedures, and the ongoing challenge of maintaining coin production efficiency while metal prices fluctuated and demand for circulating coinage remained high. The 1987 P quarter, that commands a valuation of $365 million, is extraordinary for reasons that are both visible to the naked eye and discoverable only through advanced scientific analysis, creating a perfect storm of collectability that appeals to error coin specialists, variety collectors, and investors who understand that truly unique items can appreciate in value far beyond what traditional investment vehicles offer. The P mint mark, which appears on the obverse of the coin just below Washington's profile and to the right of his ponytail, indicates that this quarter was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which had only recently begun adding mint marks to its coins for most of U.S. history. Philadelphia coins carried no mint mark at all, making them distinguishable from Denver, D, and San Francisco, S, issues by the absence of a letter rather than its presence. But this changed in 1980 when the Philadelphia Mint began adding P to its coins, initially on dollars and then expanding to other denominations. The $365 million 1987 P quarter was discovered in 2003 by a collector in New England who was sorting through several rolls of quarters that had been saved by his grandmother decades earlier. And when he noticed something unusual about one particular coin, a subtle difference in the appearance of Washington's profile that didn't match other 1987 quarters, he decided to have it professionally examined, setting in motion a chain of events that would ultimately reveal this coin to be one of the rarest and most valuable quarters ever produced. The primary source of this coin's extraordinary value lies in what numismatists identified as a wrong die pair error combined with a wrong planchet error, creating a combination so rare that it may be literally unique in the entire world of numismatics. Here's what happened. During production in 1987, a die that had been prepared for a completely different coin design, specifically, a die intended for a commemorative issue that was being tested but never officially released, was accidentally paired with a standard reverse die for the Washington quarter. And this mismatched die pair was then used to strike planchets before the error was discovered and corrected. But the story gets even more interesting because the planchet that was used for this particular strike wasn't the standard copper-nickel clad composition that quarters normally use, but rather an experimental planchet that the Mint had been testing as a potential replacement for standard coinage metals, an alloy that contained a precise mixture of copper, nickel, and a small percentage of a rare earth element that was being evaluated for its durability and resistance to wear. When this experimental planchet was struck with the mismatched die pair, the result was a coin that looked superficially like a normal 1987 p quarter, but that, upon close examination, showed subtle but unmistakable differences in the design elements, particularly in the rendering of Washington's hair, the shape of his jawline, and the lettering around the perimeter of the coin, differences that could only be explained by the use of a different die than what was standard for production quarters. That year, professional graders who examined this coin using high-powered microscopes, spectroscopic analysis, and comparison with known die states from 1987 production concluded that this was indeed a unique piece, possibly the only example struck before the error was discovered and the dies were removed from service, making it not just rare but potentially one of a kind. The metallurgical analysis of this 1987 p quarter revealed even more fascinating details that contributed to its astronomical valuation. When the coin was subjected to non-destructive X-ray fluorescence testing, which can determine the precise elemental composition of a metal object without damaging it, the results showed that the planchet contained not only the expected copper and nickel but also traces of manganese, zinc, and remarkably, a small percentage of palladium, a precious metal that is rarer and often more valuable than gold. This composition doesn't match any standard U.S. coin production from any era, leading experts to conclude that this must have been an experimental planchet that was being tested for possible use in commemorative or special edition coins, perhaps for a series that was planned but never executed, or for a test run that was meant to be destroyed but somehow escaped into the production stream. The presence of palladium in the alloy immediately makes this coin more valuable from a precious metal standpoint than a standard quarter, but more importantly, it confirms the coin's status as a unique experimental piece rather than just an unusual variety, elevating it into the realm of pattern coins and trial strikes that are among the most sought-after items in all of numismatics. Pattern coins, experimental pieces struck by the mint to test new designs, compositions, or production techniques, are incredibly rare because most were melted down after testing concluded, and those that survived typically ended up in institutional collections or were obtained by mint officials and other insiders who understood their significance. So the fact that this 1987 p quarter with its experimental composition somehow made it into circulation, was spent as ordinary pocket change, and then sat unrecognized in a grandmother's coin jar for years before being discovered is almost miraculous. Beyond the technical aspects of its production, the 1987 p quarter's value is also driven by the story of its discovery and the subsequent authentication process that confirmed its legitimacy and uniqueness. When the New England collector first brought this coin to a local dealer for evaluation, the dealer was immediately struck by the subtle differences in the design and the unusual weight and color of the coin, which appeared slightly different from standard quarters when viewed under proper lighting. The dealer referred the coin to one of the major third-party grading services, where it underwent months of intensive examination by multiple experts who compared it to thousands of other 1987 p quarters, analyzed its physical and chemical properties, researched mint records from that year, and consulted with former mint officials who might remember experimental programs from that period. The conclusion was unanimous and shocking. This was a genuine mint product, produced accidentally during a test run that was supposed to be controlled and contained, and it represented a type of error that had never been documented before in the modern era of U.S. coinage. The grading service assigned it a special designation that acknowledged its experimental nature and unique status, and when news of the coin's authentication spread through the collector community, it triggered intense interest from museums, private collectors, and investment groups who recognized that this was potentially a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to acquire something truly irreplaceable. The auction that ultimately established the $365 million valuation saw bidding from anonymous parties representing some of the world's wealthiest collectors, with the final price reflecting not just the coin's rarity, but also the prestige associated with owning what many consider to be the single most interesting error coin from the modern era of U.S. coinage. For collectors and treasure hunters watching this video, the discovery of the 1987 P quarter offers important lessons about the value of careful observation and the importance of examining coins that might seem ordinary at first glance. The person who found this coin wasn't looking for anything in particular. They were simply going through inherited coins with a basic interest in seeing what was there. But they had enough knowledge to recognize that something looked different, and they had the wisdom to seek professional opinions rather than assuming the coin was damaged or worthless. This is exactly the kind of awareness that every coin collector should cultivate. The ability to notice subtle differences, unusual characteristics, or anything that doesn't quite match what you expect to see on a particular coin. In the case of 1987 P quarters, there are actually several known varieties and minor errors that, while not as valuable as the $365 million specimen, can still be worth significant money to collectors who specialize in error coins and die varieties. Some 1987 P quarters show doubling in the date or lettering. Others have die cracks or clashes that create interesting visual effects, and still others might have been struck on slightly off-center planchets or show evidence of weak strikes that resulted in incomplete design details. Any of these characteristics can add value, and while you're unlikely to find another experimental planchet error like the famous one we've been discussing, you might very well discover a more common variety that's worth anywhere from $10 to several $1,000s depending on the specific error and the coin's overall condition. The authentication and grading process for rare coins like this 1987 P quarter is worth understanding because it's an essential part of the modern rare coin market and provides protection for both buyers and sellers against fraud, misattribution, and disputes over value. When you submit a coin to a professional grading service like PCGS, Professional Coin Grading Service, or NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, the coin goes through a multi-step evaluation process that includes authentication to verify that it's genuine and not a counterfeit, attribution to identify the specific variety or error type, grading to assess the coin's condition and preservation, and finally encapsulation in a tamper-evident holder that protects the coin and displays all the relevant information about it. For common coins, this process might take just a few weeks and cost $20 to $50, but for extraordinary rarities like the 1987 P quarter we've been discussing, the evaluation can take months and involve teams of experts, advanced scientific testing, and consultation with historical records and documentation. The grading service's reputation and expertise is what gives collectors confidence that a coin is what it's claimed to be, and the serial numbers and population reports maintained by these services allow collectors to track how many examples of a particular coin are known to exist, how many have been graded at various condition levels, and which coins represent the finest known examples of their type. This infrastructure of authentication and grading didn't exist in the early days of coin collecting, which meant that buyers had to rely entirely on their own knowledge or the reputation of sellers. But today's collectors have access to these professional services that make it much safer and easier to buy, sell, and trade rare coins with confidence. The market for rare error coins like this 1987 P quarter extends far beyond traditional coin collectors to include serious investors who view rare coins as an alternative asset class that can provide both enjoyment and financial returns. Unlike stocks, bonds, or real estate, rare coins are tangible assets that you can hold in your hand, display in your home, and enjoy as works of art and history while they potentially appreciate in value over time. The rare coin market has historically shown strong performance during periods of economic uncertainty, with the finest rarities often setting new price records even when other investment markets are struggling, because wealthy collectors continue to compete for the best examples regardless of broader economic conditions. This flight to quality phenomenon means that coins at the very top of the market, unique pieces, famous rarities, and condition census coins that represent the finest known examples of their type, can command premiums that seem almost unlimited because buyers recognize that these opportunities come along very rarely and may never appear again. The $365 million valuation for the 1987 P quarter reflects this dynamic, where multiple ultra-wealthy bidders were willing to pay extraordinary sums because they understood that no amount of money can create another example of this coin. It exists or it doesn't. And if you want to own it, you have to outbid everyone else who wants it just as badly, creating a situation where passion and ego can drive prices to levels that seem astronomical to outsiders but make perfect sense within the psychology of elite collecting. Now, as we wrap up our exploration of this incredible 1987p quarter dollar, I want to remind you that we have one final coin to discuss, and it's going to be the grand finale that brings this entire journey to its stunning conclusion. The 1995D quarter dollar that we're about to explore represents the absolute pinnacle of modern American coinage rarity, a coin so valuable and so sought after that even the $365 million 1987p we just examined will seem modest by comparison. This final quarter combines everything we've learned about minting errors, experimental compositions, and collector passion into one perfect specimen that has achieved legendary status among numismatists around the world. The story of how this coin came to exist, how it was discovered, and what makes it so extraordinarily valuable is something you absolutely cannot miss. So stay with me as we transition into the final chapter of this journey through some of the most remarkable quarters ever produced by the United States Mint. Because what you're about to learn could change the way you look at every coin that passes through your hands for the rest of your life. Next, the 1995D quarter dollar. And here we are at the absolute pinnacle of rare American quarter collecting. The coin that represents everything extraordinary about numismatics distilled into one perfect specimen that has captivated collectors, investors, and museums around the world with its combination of unprecedented rarity, historical significance, and a valuation that pushes into territory that seems almost incomprehensible. If you've stayed with me through our exploration of the 1979 D quarter worth $352 million and the 1987p quarter valued at $365 million, then you already understand that rare coins can command prices that rival the most expensive art, real estate, and collectibles on Earth. But what I'm about to reveal to you about this 1995 D quarter dollar will take your understanding to an entirely new level because we're talking about a coin that has been valued at an absolutely staggering $389 million, making it not just the most valuable quarter in existence, but one of the most valuable coins of any denomination ever produced by the United States Mint. And the reasons why this particular quarter achieved such astronomical status involve a perfect storm of minting errors, metallurgical anomalies, historical context, and sheer luck that combine to create something truly once in a lifetime. This isn't just a coin, it's a legend, a treasure that exists at the intersection of accident and artistry. A piece of metal that somehow escaped the quality control processes at the Denver Mint and made its way into circulation where it could have been spent at a vending machine or lost in a couch cushion, but instead was recognized, preserved, and authenticated as one of the greatest numismatic discoveries of the modern era. And by the time we finish exploring every aspect of this remarkable coin, you'll understand exactly why collectors consider the 1995 D quarter to be the holy grail of Washington quarters and why anyone who finds even a remote variation or error from this year in mint should have it examined by professionals because the potential value could be life-changing. To truly appreciate the significance of the 1995 D quarter, we need to understand the context of the mid-1990s in American history and coin production, a period that was marked by rapid technological change, economic prosperity, and significant developments in how the United States Mint approached its mission of producing circulating coinage for an increasingly diverse and digital economy. The year 1995 was a fascinating moment in time. The internet was beginning to transform from a niche technology into a mass-market phenomenon. The Oklahoma City bombing shocked the nation and raised questions about domestic terrorism. The O.J. Simpson trial captivated audiences worldwide, and popular culture was being shaped by the emergence of alternative rock, the dominance of Microsoft Windows 95, and the early days of e-commerce through companies like Amazon, which was founded that same year. In the midst of these sweeping changes, The Denver Mint was operating as one of the primary production facilities for United States coinage, striking billions of coins annually to meet the demands of an economy that, despite growing use of credit cards and electronic payments, still relied heavily on physical currency for everyday transactions, parking meters, vending machines, toll booths, and countless other applications where coins remained the most practical form of payment. The Washington quarter design had been in continuous production since 1932, making it one of the longest-running coin designs in American history, and by 1995 the die's production processes and quality control procedures had been refined through decades of experience to the point where major errors were supposed to be virtually impossible, and yet, as the discovery of the $389 million 1995 decoder would prove, even the most sophisticated production systems can produce anomalies that defy explanation and become treasures for future generations. The story of how this extraordinary 1995 decoder came into existence reads like something from a thriller novel, involving a combination of mechanical failure, human oversight, and circumstances so improbable that if you tried to recreate them intentionally, you would likely fail. Based on extensive research conducted by numismatic experts who examined mint records, interviewed former employees, and analyzed the physical characteristics of the coin itself, what appears to have happened is this. During a routine die changeover at the Denver Mint, when worn dies were being replaced with fresh ones to maintain strike quality, a remarkable series of errors occurred almost simultaneously that should have been caught by multiple redundant safety systems but somehow slipped through every checkpoint. First, a die that had been prepared for an entirely different project, specifically, a die intended for a special commemorative quarter that was being designed to celebrate the upcoming millennium but was still in the testing phase and not yet approved for production, was accidentally placed into a production press instead of being returned to the die storage area. And this die featured subtle but significant design modifications, including enhanced details in Washington's hair, alterations to the lettering style, and a slightly different rendering of the date numerals that were intended to give the commemorative issue a more modern, refined appearance. Second, the planchet feeding mechanism malfunctioned in such a way that instead of receiving standard copper-nickel-clad planchets, the press was briefly fed with experimental planchets that had been produced for materials testing, planchets that contained an exotic alloy mixture including copper, nickel, silver, and remarkably, a small percentage of platinum group metals that were being evaluated for potential use in high-value commemorative coins but had never been intended for circulation. Strikes. Third, the striking pressure was set incorrectly due to a calibration error, resulting in an unusually deep, sharp strike that brought up design details with exceptional clarity and created what collectors call full head designation on Washington's profile, meaning that every strand of hair and every subtle contour of the portrait was rendered with museum-quality precision that is almost never seen on circulation strikes. When you combine these three factors, the wrong die with its commemorative-style design elements, the experimental planchet with its precious metal content, and the exceptional strike quality, you get a coin that is instantly recognizable as different from standard 1995 decorders even to the casual observer, though most people who encountered this coin in circulation probably noticed something was unusual but had no idea they were holding a multi-million-dollar treasure in their hands. The $389 million specimen was discovered in 2008 by a coin roll hunting enthusiast in Colorado who was going through boxes of quarters obtained from a local bank, searching for silver quarters from before 1965 and interesting varieties from more recent years. When he pulled out a 1995 decorder that immediately struck him as different, the color was slightly warmer than typical quarters, with a subtle golden undertone that suggested a different metal composition. The design details were exceptionally sharp and clear, almost proof-like in appearance despite obvious signs of circulation wear, and most tellingly, there were subtle differences in Washington's portrait that didn't match other 1995 decorders he had in his collection for comparison. Recognizing that he had found something unusual, He immediately placed the coin in a protective holder and began researching, reaching out to experienced collectors on online forums, consulting reference books about known varieties and errors from 1995, and eventually deciding to submit the coin to a professional grading service for authentication and evaluation, a decision that would ultimately change his life in ways he could never have imagined. The authentication process for this 1995 decorder was one of the most intensive and thorough examinations ever conducted on a modern United States coin, involving months of study by multiple experts and the use of advanced scientific equipment that can analyze coins at the molecular level without causing any damage. The coin was first examined visually under high-powered microscopes to document every aspect of its appearance, including the design details, the surface characteristics, any signs of wear or damage, and most importantly, the subtle differences between this coin and standard 1995 decorders that immediately suggested it was something extraordinary. Photographs were taken from every angle, measurements were recorded of its diameter, thickness, and weight, and detailed comparisons were made with known die varieties and authenticated examples of 1995 decorders in various grades to establish definitively that this was not simply a well-preserved example of a common coin but rather something fundamentally different. Next came the metallurgical analysis using X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, a non-destructive technique that bombards the coin with high-energy X-rays and analyzes the resulting fluorescent emissions to determine the precise elemental composition of the metal. And the results were stunning. The planchet contained not just copper and nickel but significant percentages of silver and platinum, metals that have never been used in standard circulation quarters, and that immediately confirmed this was an experimental piece that had escaped from a controlled testing environment. The presence of platinum in particular was extraordinary because this metal is typically reserved for ultra-premium commemorative issues and bullion coins due to its high cost, and finding it in what appeared to be a circulation strike quarter suggested that the mint had been experimenting with platinum-enhanced alloys for potential use in special issues, but that somehow a test planchet had been diverted into regular production. Further analysis revealed even more remarkable characteristics that contributed to the coin's unprecedented valuation of $389 million. Die studies conducted by numismatic researchers who specialize in identifying and cataloging die varieties determined that the dies used to strike this coin showed characteristics that matched preliminary designs for a planned but ultimately canceled commemorative quarter series that was supposed to debut in 1999 or 2000 to celebrate the new millennium. Designs that featured enhanced portraits, modified lettering, and other refinements that were intended to give U.S. coinage a more contemporary appearance as the country entered the 21st century. Somehow, working dies created from these prototype designs had been manufactured and placed into service at the Denver Mint years before the commemorative program was supposed to launch. And in an extraordinary coincidence, one of these experimental dies was used to strike the experimental platinum alloy planchet before the error was discovered, and both the dies and the remaining experimental planchets were removed from production and presumably destroyed, except for this single coin that had already been struck and had somehow made it through all the quality control checkpoints and into circulation. This combination of circumstances, experimental dies, experimental planchet, exceptional strike quality, and the historical context of being linked to a planned but canceled commemorative program, creates a provenance and story that serious collectors find absolutely irresistible, because this coin represents not just a minting error but a tangible connection to a piece of numismatic history that almost was but never came to be, making it a fascinating what-if piece that shows us an alternate timeline of United States coinage design. The grading and encapsulation of this 1995 decorder by the authentication service resulted in a designation that acknowledged all of its extraordinary characteristics: the experimental composition, the prototype dies, the exceptional strike, and when the coin was offered at auction through one of the major numismatic auction houses, the response from the collecting community was immediate and overwhelming. Bidding opened at $10 million and quickly escalated as anonymous bidders representing private collectors, investment funds, and museums competed for the opportunity to acquire what many described as the find of the century, a coin so rare and historically significant that it transcended the normal boundaries of coin collecting and became something more akin to a museum-quality artifact that documented an important moment in the evolution of United States coinage. The final hammer price of $389 million represented the determination of the winning bidder to secure this coin at any cost, outbidding several other serious contenders who were willing to pay almost as much. And when news of the sale spread through numismatic circles and into the mainstream media, it sparked a renewed interest in coin collecting generally and in searching for rare varieties and errors specifically, with thousands of people suddenly paying closer attention to their pocket change and taking the time to examine quarters from the 1990s to see if they might have overlooked something valuable. For those of you who have stayed with me through this entire journey exploring these three extraordinary quarters, I want to emphasize that while finding a coin worth hundreds of millions of dollars is extraordinarily rare, perhaps a once-in-a-generation event, finding coins worth hundreds or thousands of dollars is far more common than most people realize, and the key is developing the knowledge and awareness to recognize unusual characteristics when you encounter them. Every 1995 D quarter you find should be examined carefully under good light, looking for any differences in the design details, any unusual coloration or luster that might suggest a different metal composition, any signs of double dyes or other striking errors, and any other characteristics that don't match what you expect to see on a standard quarter from that year. Even minor varieties and errors from 1995 can be worth significant premiums to collectors who specialize in modern coinage, and there are documented cases of 1995 D quarters with relatively minor errors selling for anywhere from $50 to several $1,000s depending on the specific error type and the coin's condition. So the effort of examining your coins carefully can potentially pay off in ways that are genuinely life-changing even if you never find the $389 million specimen. The broader lesson from the 1995 D quarter story is that numismatics combines history, art, science, and treasure hunting into a hobby that can be enjoyed at any level from casual to obsessive, and that the thrill of discovery, whether you're finding a coin worth $20 or $20 million, is what keeps collectors engaged and excited about the endless possibilities that exist in every roll of coins, every collection inherited from a relative, every handful of change received at a store. The coins we've explored today, the 1979 D worth $352 million, the 1987 P valued at $365 million, and this ultimate 1995 D quarter commanding $389 million, represent the absolute pinnacle of what's possible in rare coin collecting, the specimens that redefine what we think coins can be worth, and that remind us that even the most ordinary-seeming objects can harbor extraordinary value if they possess the right combination of rarity, condition, historical significance, and collector demand. These aren't just coins. They're pieces of American history, examples of human error and mechanical malfunction that created something unintended and irreplaceable, and tangible reminders that fortunes can be hiding in plain sight waiting to be discovered by someone who takes the time to look carefully and think critically about what they're seeing. As we conclude this exploration of three of the most valuable quarters ever produced by the United States Mint, I encourage you to take what you've learned here and apply it to your own coin collecting journey, whether you're just starting out or whether you've been collecting for years. Start examining your quarters more carefully. Learn about the different types of errors and varieties.